That car belongs in a graveyard, Grant Huxley said, loud enough for half the square to hear, and the laughter rolled across downtown Ashford like loose change spilling on polished marble. Ethan Calloway kept one hand on the steering wheel of the broken 1967 Mustang and the other on the shoulder of his 9-year-old daughter, Lily, who sat beside him clutching a faded photograph of her mother. The car had not arrived with glory. It had coughed its way down Main Street under a gray Ohio sky, its faded blue paint scratched thin, its chrome dulled by years of weather, its right headlight dim as an old porch bulb. Around it, everything else shined. Whitaker Motors had taken over the city square for the launch of its newest electric luxury line, with clean white tents, glass display walls, bright cameras, and banners tall enough to cover the courthouse steps. People in tailored suits moved like they owned the air. Security guards wore earpieces. Reporters smiled into microphones. And in the middle of all that money, that noise, that perfect corporate shine, Ethan's Mustang looked like a memory someone had forgotten to bury. "Sir, you need to move this vehicle," a guard said, not unkindly, but not gently either. Ethan nodded once. "We're trying." "Trying is for parking lots," Grant said, stepping closer with a grin that had never learned mercy. "This is a CEO event. Not a tow yard." A few people laughed again. Lily lowered her eyes. Ethan felt it before he saw it, the tiny way her shoulders folded inward, as if every laugh had weight. He did not answer Grant. He did not defend himself. He just reached across the cracked bench seat and adjusted the old photo in Lily's hands, the one of Claire Calloway smiling in a denim jacket beside that very Mustang, back when the paint still held sunlight and the world had not yet asked Ethan to become both father and mother. Then the crowd shifted. A silence opened, clean and sharp. Madeline Whitaker stepped out from beneath the main tent, surrounded by assistants, investors, and camera crews. She was 34, elegant, pale-skinned, and composed in the way powerful people often are when no one has ever made them wait in the rain. Her white coat did not move in the wind. Her dark glasses reflected the Mustang without letting anyone read her eyes. "What's the issue?" she asked. Grant gave a small laugh. A local mechanic thought this was the right place to showcase American decay. Ethan looked at her then, calm, tired, and still. Madeline walked around the Mustang once. Her heels clicked against the pavement. The city seemed to listen with her. She looked at the rust near the wheel well, the taped side mirror, the hood that would not close flush, and finally at Lily's little hands wrapped around the photograph. For one brief second, something almost human passed across her face, but it vanished before kindness could become visible. "Some things are too broken to be saved," she said. The sentence was quiet, but it landed harder than shouting. Grant smiled. Cameras turned. Someone in the crowd whispered, "That poor kid." Ethan leaned toward Lily and gently covered one of her ears, not fast, not dramatic, just with the quiet dignity of a man who had learned that the world could be cruel, but a father did not have to let cruelty be the loudest voice his child remembered. Lily looked up at him, her eyes wet but steady. "Daddy," she whispered, "is Mommy's car really trash?" And for the first time all morning, the square stopped laughing. Ethan swallowed, placed his hand on the cracked steering wheel, and looked past the CEO, past the cameras, past the beautiful machines that had never carried grief, groceries, hospital bags, birthday balloons, or last goodbyes. "No, sweetheart," he said softly. "Some people just don't recognize a second chance when it still has dust on it." Madeline heard him. So did Grant. So did the reporters standing close enough to catch every word. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and second chances, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Ethan Calloway. The guard stepped aside, suddenly unsure. Ethan turned the key. The Mustang coughed once, twice, then fell silent. Another ripple of laughter tried to rise, but it was weaker now. Lily pressed the photograph against her chest. Ethan got out, moved to the front, and began pushing the car by hand. One slow step. Then another. His boots scraped the pavement. The wind lifted the corner of Claire's photo through the open window. And behind him, under the clean white banner of Whitaker Motors, Madeline Whitaker stood perfectly still, watching a man push a broken Mustang away from the brightest stage in the city, unaware that 30 days later, that same car would return and leave the entire city speechless. The ride back to the east side of Ashford felt longer than 12 miles. Ethan kept both hands on the wheel while the Mustang rode on the back of Earl Bennett's tow truck, its old tires strapped down, its faded body rocking gently with every crack in the county road. Lily sat beside him in the cab, still holding Claire's photograph, still quiet in the way children become quiet when they are trying to be brave for the parent who is trying to be brave for them. Earl, grey-bearded and kind, did not ask what happened at the square. He had heard enough from the local radio before they even left downtown. People talk big when they are standing under expensive tents, Earl finally said. Ethan looked out at the passing cornfields, brown and bare beneath the late afternoon sky. Talking does not make them wrong. Earl glanced at him. No. But it does not make them decent either. Lily looked down at the photograph in her lap. Mom would have said something funny. Ethan smiled faintly, but the smile carried a bruise. Your mom could turn an insult into a church bell. What would she have said? Ethan thought for a moment as the tow truck rolled past a boarded-up feed store and a little white chapel with peeling paint. She would have said that rust is just metal remembering the rain. Lily almost smiled. That was enough. By the time they reached Callaway Auto Repair, the sky had turned the color of wet newspaper. The garage sat behind an old gas station that had closed before Lily was born, 2 service bays, a gravel lot, 1 flickering sign, and a roof that complained every time the wind shifted. It was not much, but Ethan had kept it clean. Tools hung in perfect rows. Oil stains had been scrubbed until they looked like shadows instead of neglect. On the far wall was a calendar with 30 days circled in red. Not for a contest. Not for pride. For Lily's birthday. Claire had marked that date 2 years before she passed, back when she still believed time would be generous. Earl lowered the Mustang into the garage. The tires touched concrete with a soft thud. Lily climbed out and walked straight to the passenger side, placing her small hand on the cracked window frame. Do you think it remembers her? She asked. Ethan set his jaw gently, the way a man does when grief knocks but he refuses to let it enter all at once. I think we do. That is what matters. Inside the garage, the air smelled of motor oil, sawdust, cold coffee, and rainwater dripping from a leak above the parts shelf. Ethan pulled the chain on the overhead light. It buzzed awake. The Mustang sat in the yellow glow like an old soldier who had forgotten how to stand but not why he had stood in the first place. Lily placed Claire's photograph on the passenger seat and whispered, "We brought her home." Ethan turned away for a second. Not because he was ashamed of tears, but because fathers sometimes save their breaking for rooms where children cannot hear it. Then a knock came at the office door. It was Mr. Kessler, the property owner, wearing a tan jacket and the expression of a man who had already made up his mind. He held a folded paper in one hand. "Ethan, I did not want to do this tonight." Ethan wiped his hands on a rag though they were not dirty. "Then do it tomorrow." Kessler sighed. "Bank wants the lot cleared. Developers are ready. You have 30 days to pay what is owed or vacate." Lily turned sharply. "You are taking Dad's garage." Kessler looked at the floor. "I am sorry, sweetheart." Ethan took the paper without argument. No anger. No begging. Just silence, heavy and dignified. Kessler left quickly, as if decency had become too uncomfortable to stand beside. Rain tapped the roof. The fluorescent light hummed. Lily stared at the red circle on the calendar. 30 days, she whispered. Ethan folded the notice and placed it under a wrench. Then we will use every one of them. Later, after Lily fell asleep on the old office couch under a denim jacket that still smelled faintly of cedar and home, Ethan opened the Mustang's trunk to check the spare tire well. The lid groaned upward. Inside were old shop towels, a cracked jack, and a small metal box he did not recognize. His breath slowed. He lifted it out, brushed away dust, and opened the latch. Inside was Claire's handwriting. A notebook. Blue cover. Corners worn soft. Ethan sat down on the concrete floor as if his knees had forgotten the job of standing. Page after page held sketches of the Mustang, measurements, paint ideas, engine notes, little stars beside impossible dreams. On the final page, beneath a drawing of the car crossing Ashford Bridge at sunset, Claire had written 4 words in careful ink: the second chance car. Ethan looked at his sleeping daughter. He looked at the broken Mustang. Then he closed the notebook with both hands, not like a man ending a memory, but like one accepting a promise. By Monday morning, Ashford was no longer talking about Whitaker Motors' polished launch or the silent white cars under the glass tents. It was talking about Ethan Calloway pushing an old Mustang through the city square while his little girl held a photograph like a prayer. The clip had spread across local pages before sunrise. Some people mocked him. Some defended him. Most simply watched, because the internet has a way of turning pain into entertainment before anyone asks whether a child had to live through it. Grant Huxley saw the numbers first. He stood in the top-floor conference room of Whitaker Motors with a tablet in his hand and a grin forming slowly across his face. "This is perfect," he said. Madeline Whitaker did not look up from the quarterly report in front of her. "A family was embarrassed at our event. A brand moment was born at our event," Grant corrected. "There is a difference." Around the long glass table, executives shifted in their seats. Outside the window, downtown Ashford looked small and clean beneath a pale winter sun, all church steeples, courthouse brick, and 2-lane streets pretending they had not witnessed cruelty the day before. Grant tapped the tablet and turned it toward Madeline. There was Ethan, quiet and steady, pushing the Mustang while Lily sat behind the wheel, trying not to cry. The view count had already passed 80,000. "America loves a challenge," Grant said. "Old versus new. Poor mechanic versus modern innovation. Nostalgia versus the future. We invite him back publicly. Give him 30 days. If he gets that antique across Ashford Bridge on Founder's Day, we save his little garage. If he fails, we recycle the car live and donate the value to a children's charity. Clean optics. Emotional stakes. Huge engagement." One of the vice presidents smiled carefully. "That sounds risky." Grant shrugged. "The car barely starts. Risk is not the issue." Madeline finally looked up. Her eyes were calm, but not empty. "And the man?" "The man gets a chance to prove what he clearly wants everyone to believe." "Which is?" Grant leaned back. "That broken things deserve applause." The room chuckled softly. Madeline did not. For reasons she could not name, she remembered Lily's question in the square. She remembered Ethan's answer. Some people just do not recognize a second chance when it still has dust on it. The words had stayed with her all night, unwelcome and persistent. Still, pride is a quiet lawyer. It knows how to argue until mercy sounds unreasonable. By noon, the announcement was live. Whitaker Motors invited Ethan Calloway to participate in a 30-day restoration challenge, framed as a celebration of American workmanship, sustainability, and community spirit. The comments exploded. Reporters called. Local radio hosts laughed. By 3 in the afternoon, a news van rolled into the gravel lot outside Calloway Auto Repair. Ethan was under the hood of a farmer's pickup when Lily ran in from the office holding his phone. "Dad, they want you to come downtown." Ethan wiped grease from his fingers and read the message twice. His face did not change. Earl Bennett, who had stopped by with spare belts and coffee, leaned over his shoulder. "That is not an invitation. That is a stage." Lily's voice was small. "Are they going to laugh again?" Ethan looked at the Mustang resting under the buzzing shop light, Claire's notebook open on the workbench beside it. 30 days to keep the garage. 30 days until Lily's birthday. 30 days before the only car Claire had ever loved might be crushed for strangers to watch on their phones. "Maybe," he said. "But we do not make decisions based on who might laugh." The next afternoon, Ethan and Lily stood beneath the courthouse steps where Whitaker Motors had set up cameras, microphones, and a banner that read "Future Meets Tradition." Madeline stood at the podium in a navy coat. Grant stood behind her, smiling like a man who had already written the ending. "Mr. Calloway," Madeline said, her voice smooth and public, "Ashford deserves to see whether the past still has a place on the road ahead. You have 30 days. If your Mustang crosses Ashford Bridge under its own power during Founders Day, Whitaker Motors will pay the debt on your property and sponsor your garage for 1 year." The crowd murmured. Lily gripped Ethan's hand. Madeline continued. "If it does not, the vehicle will be donated for metal recycling, and Whitaker Motors will match its value for local families in need." Grant leaned toward the microphone. "A second chance, if it can earn one." Cameras turned to Ethan. The winter wind moved through his work jacket. He looked at Madeline, then at Grant, then down at Lily. "Dad," she whispered, "Mom would want us to try." Ethan took one breath. Then he stepped to the microphone. "We accept," he said. No speech. No performance. Just 2 words, steady enough to quiet the square. And somewhere behind Madeline's polished expression, something shifted, because for the first time she realized Ethan was not trying to win a contest. He was trying to keep a promise. The first night of the 30 days began with rain, not the dramatic kind that washes a town clean, but the patient Ohio rain that taps on sheet metal until every old roof confesses where it is weak. At Callaway Auto Repair, water dripped into a coffee can near the parts shelf while Ethan stood over Claire's notebook, studying her sketches beneath the hum of a tired fluorescent light. Lily had drawn a small red heart beside the words "the second chance car," then fallen asleep in the office chair with a blanket around her shoulders and one sneaker dangling halfway off her foot. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the Mustang. "All right," he whispered. "Let us see what is still alive in you." He did not begin with the engine. A lesser mechanic might have. Ethan began with the frame, because he knew what most people forgot: if the thing underneath has lost its truth, power only makes it fail faster. He measured the rails with a tape-worn silver at the edges. He checked the torque boxes, the shock towers, the floor pans, the places where rust hides like shame beneath paint and carpet. The Mustang had suffered, but it had not surrendered. By midnight, his hands were black with oil. By 2 in the morning, the hood was off. By 4, the old garage smelled of penetrating fluid, hot coffee, wet concrete, and memory. Earl Bennett came by at sunrise carrying biscuits wrapped in foil. He stopped in the doorway when he saw the engine parts laid out across 3 work tables, each bolt tagged, each wire labeled, each bracket cleaned and aligned. "Lord have mercy," Earl said softly. "You worked all night." Ethan did not look up. She needed someone to listen. Earl stepped closer, eyes narrowing at the drawings on the wall. "That is not a regular restoration." Ethan paused just long enough for the silence to answer first. "Claire wanted the car to feel old and drive new. And you know how to do that?" Ethan turned a wrench with quiet precision. "I used to." Earl heard the words beneath the words, the locked door inside them, and did not force it open. By the 3rd day, neighbors began stopping by for reasons they pretended were casual. Mrs. Alvarez from the bakery brought day-old cinnamon rolls. Deputy Howard dropped off an unused battery tester. A retired school bus mechanic named Ray Tompkins leaned against the bay door and watched Ethan rebuild a carburetor with the patience of a man repairing a clock. "You always this careful?" Ray asked. Ethan smiled faintly. "Careless work is just disrespect in work clothes." Ray did not laugh. He understood. The town had expected desperation, but what they saw was discipline. They saw a single father who still made Lily finish her homework before handing him tools. They saw him pause a full restoration to fix Mrs. Alvarez's delivery van for free because her oven repair bill had taken the money she saved for brakes. They saw Lily stand on a wooden crate and polish chrome trim while whispering to the Mustang as if it were a sleeping horse. On the sixth evening, a white-haired man in a brown wool coat stepped into the garage and stopped dead beneath the buzzing light. His name was Walter Reese, retired engineer, former judge at the Midwest Automotive Design Expo. He had come only to see the car everyone was arguing about online. But then he saw the blueprint pinned above Ethan's bench. The color left his face. "Where did you get that?" Walter asked. Ethan's hand stilled on the socket wrench. "My wife kept it." Walter moved closer, reading the faded title block, tracing one trembling finger along the hybrid drive layout, the reinforced subframe geometry, the handwritten correction marks. "I have seen this before," he said. Earl looked up from the corner. "Seen what?" Walter swallowed. "This design won the National Prototype Award in Detroit 10 years ago. The creator disappeared before the contracts were signed." The garage went quiet. Even the rain seemed to soften. Lily stepped out of the office, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy?" Ethan lowered the wrench onto the workbench, gentle as a church offering. He looked at the Mustang, then at Claire's notebook, then at the old blueprint carrying a name he had buried beneath bills, grief, and fatherhood. Walter leaned in and read it aloud with reverence. Ethan Calloway. Lead designer. And for the first time, the people in that little garage understood that the man the city had mocked was not trying to prove he could fix an old car. He was trying to remember the man he had once been. By the 12th night, the garage no longer looked like a place where one man was repairing a car. It looked like a small town remembering how to believe in something together. Extension cords ran from Earl Bennett's truck to the workbench. Mrs. Alvarez had left a paper bag of warm empanadas beside the office door. Ray Tompkins had spent 3 evenings helping Ethan fit the rebuilt suspension, saying little, nodding often, because old mechanics know that respect does not need a parade. Lily had taped Claire's drawing of the Mustang above the tool chest, right beside the red calendar where each crossed-off day felt less like a countdown and more like a heartbeat. Ethan worked with a quiet rhythm that made people lower their voices when they entered. 3 turns of the wrench. 1 look at the blueprint. 2 slow breaths. Then another piece of the past came clean in his hands. Late that Friday, after the volunteers had gone home and Lily had finished her spelling homework on a stack of tire catalogs, a black sedan rolled to a stop across the street with its headlights off. Madeline Whitaker sat behind the wheel, her hands resting on the leather with the rigid calm of someone who had not planned to come and did not know why she had stayed. She had told herself it was due diligence. She had told herself investors would ask questions. She had told herself Grant's campaign needed oversight. But none of those reasons explained why she had parked in the rain for 20 minutes, watching the glow from Ethan's garage spill across the wet gravel like candlelight from a chapel window. Inside, Ethan sat on a rolling stool, his shoulders bowed from exhaustion, one hand still resting on a fender he had sanded down to bare metal. Lily moved quietly around him, careful not to wake him. She picked up his old work jacket from the back of a chair and draped it over him. Then she walked to the passenger side of the Mustang, leaned her forehead against the door, and whispered so softly Madeline almost did not hear it through the open crack of the garage window. "Please do not die. You are the only thing that still smells like Mom." Madeline's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. The rain blurred the windshield, but it could not blur the memory that rose in her chest without permission. Her own father, Thomas Whitaker, had loved old cars. Not as assets. Not as museum pieces. He loved them because he believed machines carried the fingerprints of the people who built them, fixed them, rode in them, and trusted them. She had hated that belief after the accident. She had hated the smell of gasoline, the old leather seats, the chrome, the nostalgia, the way people talked about classic cars as if beauty could excuse pain. For years, she had built a company on silence around that wound. Clean engines. Clean lines. Clean future. Nothing old enough to hurt her. Then she looked again at Lily, a little girl speaking to a car as if it were the last room in the house where her mother might still answer. Ethan stirred awake and saw his daughter there. Lily? She wiped her eyes quickly. I was just checking the door. He did not correct her. He only stood, walked over, and rested a hand on the roof. Your mom always said this car had a stubborn heart. Lily looked up. Like you. Ethan gave a tired smile. Like you. Outside, Madeline sat perfectly still, and something in her began to crack, not in a broken way, but in the way ice cracks when spring finally presses from underneath. She reached for the folder on the passenger seat, the one her assistant had prepared with old records about Ethan Calloway. Most of it was ordinary. Property debt. Repair licenses. Tax filings. But one photocopied page had bothered her all afternoon. A decade-old engineering sketch. A reinforced hybrid drive concept. A handwritten notation in the margin. She held it closer beneath the dim sedan light. There, beneath the title block carrying Ethan's name, was another signature, smaller, familiar, impossible to mistake. Thomas Whitaker. Her father had signed Ethan Calloway's blueprint. Madeline looked back at the garage, at the sleeping father, the grieving child, the half-restored Mustang, and for the first time since the challenge began, she understood that she had not mocked a stranger's junk. She had mocked the last promise of a family her father had once believed in. By the 18th day, the town had begun to change its mind, and Grant Huxley hated nothing more than a crowd that would not stay where he placed it. At first, the story had belonged to Whitaker Motors. It had been clean, controlled, profitable. A poor mechanic, an impossible car, a countdown to failure. But then people started posting videos from the garage. Mrs. Alvarez filmed Ethan fixing her delivery van without charging $1. Earl Bennett posted a picture of Lily asleep beside the Mustang with a spelling book open on her lap. Walter Reese, who had judged engines before half the city council was born, wrote a long public comment saying Ethan Calloway was not pretending to be an engineer, he had once been one of the finest young automotive minds in the Midwest. By morning, the laughter had softened into curiosity. By evening, curiosity had turned into respect. Grant stood alone in his office, scrolling through the comments with his jaw tight. This is becoming sentimental, he muttered. Sentimental gets messy. He called 2 local influencers, then a radio host, then a blogger who owed him a favor from the launch event. By noon, a new headline appeared across Ashford's feeds, questions grow around mechanics' mysterious design claims. Then another, did Calloway copy Whitaker technology? The word spread faster than truth because suspicion does not need proof to feel important. Customers canceled appointments. A parts supplier delayed Ethan's order. Someone left a printed article taped to the garage door with red marker across the top, fraud. Lily found it first. She stood outside in her school backpack, staring at the word as if it had been written directly on her father. Ethan stepped beside her and gently removed the paper. Is it true? She asked, not because she believed it, but because children need the people they love to say the truth out loud. Ethan folded the article once, then again. No. Then why are they saying it? He looked across the gravel lot at the gray street, at cars passing slower than usual, at people pretending not to look. Because some people would rather question a good thing than admit they were wrong about it. That afternoon, Mr. Kessler returned with a lock and a county notice. His face carried embarrassment, but his hands still carried the paperwork. "Ethan, I got pressure from the development company. They say the unpaid balance gives them the right to secure the property early." Earl stepped forward. "That is not right." Kessler looked tired. "Right and legal do not always shake hands." Ethan did not raise his voice. He did not shame the man. He simply asked for 10 minutes to remove Lily's school things from the office. When the garage door rolled down and the new chain snapped into place, the sound echoed across the lot like a verdict. Lily cried in the truck, silently, with her face turned toward the window. Ethan sat beside her, hands folded, carrying the kind of anger that knows it must not become its own enemy. "We are done, are we not?" she whispered. He looked at the locked garage, then at the narrow alley behind the building where one warped plywood panel had been loose since spring. "No, sweetheart," he said. "We are just out of the easy door." That night, under a moon hidden behind low clouds, Ethan slipped into his own garage through the back wall with a flashlight between his teeth and Claire's notebook tucked beneath his jacket. Earl did not ask permission to follow. Ray Tompkins came after him carrying sockets. Mrs. Alvarez left sandwiches at the alley entrance. No speeches. No cameras. No anger loud enough to become foolish. Just neighbors choosing decency in the dark. Inside, the Mustang waited beneath a tarp like a promise under a blanket. Ethan pulled it back and touched the fender. "We keep going," he whispered. Across the street, the old bakery security camera blinked red above its awning, recording the alley, the garage, and the side door Grant Huxley had used 2 nights earlier when he thought no one was watching. In the morning, Madeline Whitaker's assistant would find a message from Mrs. Alvarez with one sentence attached to the video file: "I think your company has been telling the wrong story." Madeline Whitaker watched the bakery footage 3 times before she said a word. The first time, she watched Grant Huxley enter the alley behind Callaway Auto Repair after midnight, his collar raised, his face turned away from the streetlights. The second time, she watched him leave through the same side path 6 minutes later, carrying something small beneath his coat. The third time, she stopped the video on the moment his hand touched the back door, and the silence in her office became so deep that even her assistant stopped breathing loudly. "Cancel my 10 o'clock, Madeline said. "Cancel all of it." Her assistant nodded quickly. "Should I call legal?" "Not yet." Madeline closed the laptop. "First, I am going to do what I should have done in the beginning." By late afternoon, she stood in the archive room beneath Whitaker Motors, surrounded by filing cabinets her father had labeled by hand before the company became too polished for paper. The room smelled of cardboard, dust, and old ambition. Thomas Whitaker had kept everything. Sketches. Letters. Failed prototypes. Thank you notes from mechanics he had helped when helping people was still part of the business model. Madeline opened the box marked Independent Hybrid Concepts, 2014, and found Ethan Callaway's name before she was ready for it. There were letters from her father praising Ethan's design, photographs from a Detroit expo, and one unfinished scholarship contract with a note written in Thomas's careful blue ink: "Do not lose this young man. He understands machines because he understands people." Madeline sat down on the concrete floor in her expensive coat and read the line again. Somewhere above her, Whitaker Motors continued humming like a company that believed money could outrun memory. But down there, among her father's forgotten papers, Madeline felt the truth arrive quietly, and truth, when it is late, does not knock gently. That evening, she drove alone to the back of Callaway Auto Repair. No driver. No assistant. No cameras. The garage was still officially locked, but light spilled through the gaps in the plywood, and inside she could hear the soft click of tools, the scrape of a stool, and Lily's sleepy voice reading vocabulary words from a school worksheet. Madeline stood in the alley for a moment, then knocked on the wooden panel. The noise inside stopped. Earl Bennett pulled it open first, holding a wrench like a question. His eyes narrowed. "You are a long way from your glass office." Madeline accepted that without defense. I need to speak to Mr. Calloway. Ethan came into view. Behind him, sleeves rolled up, face tired, dignity still intact. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Ethan nodded once. Let her in. The garage was colder than she expected. The Mustang sat half-assembled, beautiful in pieces, its primered body glowing under work lights. Lily watched from the office doorway, guarded but curious. Madeline looked at Ethan, then at the floor. Grant lied. Earl gave a dry laugh. That is not news. He also entered your shop and interfered with the project. I have the footage. Ethan's expression did not sharpen. He simply closed his eyes for one breath, as if confirmation hurt less than suspicion but still hurt. Madeline continued, her voice lower now. And my father knew you. He believed in your work. He tried to bring you into Whitaker Motors 10 years ago. Ethan looked toward the blueprint on the wall. Your father was kind to me. Why did you disappear? She asked softly. Ethan glanced toward Lily, then back at the car. Claire got sick. Treatments were 90 miles away. Lily was too. A future is a fine thing, Miss Whitaker, but sometimes the person beside you needs the present more. The answer settled over the room with grace and weight. Madeline had prepared an apology in the car, clean and professional. It died before it reached her mouth. What came out instead was smaller and more honest. I mocked the only man my father once believed in. Ethan wiped his hands slowly on a rag. Then maybe your father saw something both of us forgot. She looked at the Mustang. What do you still need? Earl crossed his arms. A miracle would be convenient. Ethan shook his head. Not a miracle. A part. Original steering column assembly compatible with the conversion. Rare. Expensive. Mostly gone. Madeline's face changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. My father kept a private collection. Ethan looked at her. Classic Mustangs. One, she said. A 1967 fastback he never let anyone touch. The garage went silent. Lily stepped closer, hope rising carefully, like a candle afraid of wind. Madeline met her eyes. Your father has spent 18 days keeping a promise. It is time someone helped him finish it. Founder's Day arrived. Under a bright, cold sky, the kind of Ohio morning that made every flag snap cleanly above Main Street and every breath show white for half a second before disappearing. Ashford had dressed itself up in bunting, food trucks, marching bands, church bake sale tables, and folding chairs lined 3 rows deep along the route to Ashford Bridge. At the center of the square, Whitaker Motors had built a stage with silver railings and a covered platform for the recycling machine Grant had insisted on displaying like a monument to certainty. He stood beside it in a tailored charcoal coat, smiling for cameras, waving to people who did not know he had spent the last 12 days trying to bury the truth beneath louder headlines. Ladies and gentlemen, Grant announced into the microphone, today we honor innovation, responsibility, and the courage to let go of what no longer serves the future. The crowd clapped politely. Some looked toward the east end of Main Street. Some checked the countdown clock. Madeline stood at the side of the stage in a navy coat, her face calm, her hands folded, saying nothing. Grant leaned closer to her and whispered, if he does not show in 3 minutes, I am calling it. Madeline did not look at him. You have called enough things. He frowned, but before he could answer, a sound moved through the city. It was not loud at first. It was low, warm, and steady, like thunder remembering how to be music. People turned. The marching band fell quiet one instrument at a time. A little boy on his father's shoulders pointed toward the far end of Main Street. Then the Mustang appeared. It rolled past the old post office and into the sunlight, no longer faded, no longer ashamed, painted a deep midnight blue that caught the sky and held it. The chrome shined without showing off. The tires gripped the pavement smoothly. The engine note carried the soul of the old car, but beneath it was something cleaner, quieter, almost graceful, as if two eras had learned to breathe together. Ethan drove with both hands on the wheel, wearing a clean denim shirt and the same tired dignity he had carried when the city laughed. Lily sat beside him, buckled in, her hair tied. With a blue ribbon, Claire's photograph resting against the dashboard. Behind them, Earl Bennett drove his tow truck like an escort of honor. Mrs. Alvarez followed in her bakery van. Ray Tompkins came next in his old pickup. Then came a line of neighbors, volunteers, and finally a sleek Whitaker sedan driven by Madeline herself, not leading the procession, not owning it, simply following what she had finally learned to respect. The Mustang stopped before the stage. No one laughed. No one even whispered. Ethan stepped out and opened the hood. Engineers from Whitaker Motors leaned forward. Reporters moved closer. Under the hood, the restored system gleamed with careful workmanship, original lines preserved, modern hybrid assistance integrated with astonishing restraint, wiring clean as scripture, every bracket shaped for purpose, every detail carrying the patience of a man who had refused to let grief make him careless. Walter Reese removed his glasses and whispered, "That is not a restoration. That is a resurrection." Grant grabbed the microphone, his smile cracking at the edges. "A charming display, but questions remain about intellectual property." Madeline stepped forward before he could continue. "Yes," she said, taking the second microphone. "Questions do remain." The square turned toward her. She looked at Ethan first, then Lily, then the crowd. This design was not stolen from Whitaker Motors. It was recognized by Thomas Whitaker 10 years ago as one of the most promising independent concepts in American automotive engineering. She lifted a framed document from her assistant. The creator was Ethan Callaway. A hush fell so complete that the flags above the courthouse seemed loud. Madeline continued, her voice steady but no longer cold. "Mr. Callaway left that future behind to care for his wife and raise his daughter. While he kept his dignity, my company allowed arrogance to question his character. That ends today." Grant's face lost its color. The bakery footage appeared on the large screen behind them, showing him entering the alley behind the garage. The crowd did not erupt. It did something worse for a proud man. It went silent. Ethan closed the Mustang's hood with a soft click. Lily reached for his hand. Madeline turned to him, not as a chief executive officer, but as a woman finally standing on the right side of truth. "Mr. Callaway," she said, "Ashford Bridge is waiting." Ethan nodded once, helped Lily back into the car, and turned the key. The Mustang moved forward through the parted crowd, across Main Street, toward the bridge Claire had drawn in her notebook. And as its midnight blue body crossed into the sunlight over the river, the entire city stood still, watching a broken thing prove it had only been waiting for someone faithful enough to bring it home. The Mustang crossed Ashford Bridge at 11:32 in the morning, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan Callaway did not feel as if he were dragging the past behind him. He felt it riding with him, not heavy, not wounded, not begging to be fixed, but present in the warm hum beneath the floorboards and the winter sunlight slipping across the hood. Lily sat beside him with both hands folded around Claire's photograph, her eyes wide as the river opened beneath them. The bridge rails flashed by in silver lines. Church bells rang from downtown. Behind them, the procession slowed, not from traffic, but from reverence. "We made it, Mom," Lily whispered. Ethan kept his eyes forward, but one tear moved down his cheek before he could stop it. He did not wipe it away. Some tears are not weakness. Some are receipts from the soul, proof that love paid more than grief ever stole. When the Mustang returned to the square, the crowd did not cheer right away. They stood in that deep, golden silence that comes when people realize they have judged too soon and spoken too loudly. Mrs. Alvarez pressed a napkin to her eyes. Earl Bennett removed his cap. Walter Reese stood straight as a flagpole, smiling like a man who had just watched history correct its own spelling. Madeline Whittaker stepped back onto the stage, but this time there was no corporate music, no polished slogan, no performance of generosity. Just a woman holding a folder with both hands, her voice steady because humility had made it stronger. Whittaker Motors will pay the full. Outstanding balance on Callaway Auto Repair, she said. The crowd stirred, but she lifted her hand gently. And that is not enough. Ethan looked up from beside the Mustang. Madeline turned toward him. With Mr. Callaway's approval, this property will become a non-profit training garage for single parents, young people aging out of foster care, veterans rebuilding their lives, and anyone this city has been too quick to call finished. The words moved through Ashford like warmth through a cold room. Grant Huxley was escorted quietly from the side of the stage by company officials, not with spectacle, not with cruelty, but with the simple consequence of truth finally standing upright. Ethan did not watch him go. That was not because he lacked anger. It was because redemption leaves no room for worshipping revenge. Madeline came down from the stage and stood before Lily first. Your mother had beautiful ideas, she said softly. Lily looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. She said Dad could fix anything except burnt pancakes. Ethan laughed then, unexpectedly, and the sound opened something in the crowd. People laughed with him, gently, respectfully, the way a town laughs when it is grateful to be forgiven. Madeline handed Ethan the folder. Inside were incorporation papers, funding commitments, building permits, and a proposed name across the top, Callaway Community Restoration Center. Ethan read it, then closed the folder. No, he said. The square went still again. Madeline's face changed with uncertainty. Ethan looked toward the Mustang, toward the photograph on the dashboard, toward his daughter standing in the sunlight. If this place is going to teach second chances, he said, it should be named after the woman who believed in them before any of us did. Lily smiled through tears. Madeline understood before he said it. 1 week later, the old sign above the garage came down. Volunteers filled the gravel lot. Children painted fence boards. Earl fixed the stubborn bay door. Mrs. Alvarez brought more food than anyone could reasonably eat. And when the new sign rose into place, the whole street seemed to hold its breath, Claire Callaway's second chance. Garage. Ethan stood beneath it with Lily on one side and Madeline on the other, not as a replacement for what had been lost, not as a promise too soon, but as a quiet presence, a witness to the grace that can grow after pride kneels. The Mustang rested in the open bay, midnight blue and shining, not perfect because perfection was never the point. Restored things still carry seams. Healed hearts still remember the hurt. But dignity does not require an untouched life. It only asks that a person keep choosing goodness when bitterness would be easier. As sunset settled over Ashford, Lily climbed into the passenger seat one more time and placed Claire's photograph gently on the dash. Ethan started the engine. Madeline stood by the bay door, smiling softly as the old car's heart came alive. No one in the garage spoke. No one needed to. The sound itself was enough, steady, warm, redeemed. And in that quiet, the city finally understood that some people are never truly broken. They are simply waiting for love, respect, and one faithful pair of hands to remind them how to run again.